Okay, so I'm delighted to begin our very first panel as well, and it couldn't be more apt that we invite representatives from the Brazilian government to be on this first panel as well. I think one of the questions we're asking here is, well, what are the public policies? What are the enabling conditions that we need to be able to scale the bioeconomy and NbS as well? So I'm delighted to invite up to the stage Patricia, who's co-founder and partner at Brazil at Systemiq and IO Earth Partners. Welcome, Patricia. Rafael Dubeux, Secretary for the Plano de Transformação Ecológica at the Ministério da Fazenda, and André Aquino, chefe da Assessoria da Economia e Meio Ambiente at the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change, MMA. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Super happy that everybody's here so early. So thank you, Rafael and André, for traveling all the way from Brasilia to be here with us, representing the Brazilian government in this moment. When Tony asked us, I don't know if you remember, but last year in the opening of this event, Rafael, you announced here the launch of the Ecological Transformation Plan. And 1 year later, we are back here. So Tony and Viviane said, why don't you come back to prove and show that many things happened after the plan, the dream? Because we announced many things in the last few years, and I think Tony's been doing an amazing job in spreading the word in other countries. But now that we are back here, the expectations should show what happened and what's working and how we can help and where are the investment opportunities that are already out there. Just to set up a little bit of the stage for this conversation with the two of you, and also, André, just wanted to mention that in a similar way, TFFF was also a dream, but not from 1 year ago, actually from decades ago. And then when Brazil now is leading this globally, many people say, is this really going to happen or not? And now it is happening. So having the two of you here, I think it's a proof that things can happen. And also proves that the unique position that Brazil has can really help us to change what's happening in the world. Today, why Brazil is so well positioned, aside from believing, that the ecological transformation is the path for the future, 1/3 of the world's tropical forests are here, our energy matrix with 85% of renewables, we have the largest biodiversity on the planet, spanning 6 biomes. Usually people know more about the Amazon, but we actually have 6 biomes here. At the same time, to make this ecological transformation happen, we need investments. So we proved with numbers in this volunteer task force for the ecological transformation that we can double the GDP growth of Brazil, getting to 5.5% per year. And this would add around $460 billion per year to the economy in all the different areas that we've been discussing here. And nature-based solutions are at the center of the opportunity. But for that to happen, we need an investment level of something between $130 and $160 billion per year. For that to happen, we heard from investors, and I remember Rafael and André, both of you heard a lot of people saying that de-risking the investments is one of the critical pieces of the pillar. And in that way, EcoInvest is an example of something concrete that's happening. I know Mario later is going to explain a little bit better, but I was a witness when this whole idea emerged and when the minister really took it seriously together with Central Bank and BNDES and then later IDB. So this is a game changer, and this is one of the examples. I think we already have a success case there because we have 1.2 billion that was lent in the first blended finance auction. We have an auction that's going to be open now, and as Tony and James mentioned, Mario is going to explain more over lunch as well. We have also another example here with the TFFF that's about to be launched officially at COP, but the aim is to raise $125 billion for tropical forest countries in a logic that is going to help to send the money back to where the forests are. And André is going to give us a little bit more details on that. Another example of something concrete that you did is BIP, right? The Brazil Investments Platform that today already accounts with, for $21 billion in investments. And not to mention the regulation of the carbon market, the future fuels, combustível do futuro. And so I just named 5 examples of things that happened, just as again, as a witness that these things were ideas that came from the private sector in events like this and then became a reality. So now, maybe my first question to both of you here is to show what happened with these initiatives and how investors who are here can invest in each one of them. If we leave the room now, who they should look for and how they can help to make this dream become a reality and accelerate this reality for Brazil and for the world. So if you can start, Rafael, then we go to André, and I will pass the... no, you can use this one. I have another one.
Thank you very much, Patricia. I'm very glad to be here again. Very honored by the invitation. Nice to be here with my friend André as well. I'm very glad to, after 1 year launching the initiative, actually we've been working on it for about 2 years. Many things have happened since then. And it's nice to come here and present to you what was 2 years ago just an idea, what could be a possible pathway for the Brazilian development, and now it's becoming real. The first point that I want to make here is that usually, worldwide, not only in Brazil, ministries of finance are indifferent or even antagonists to a green agenda. That's not the case in Brazil. Here, the Minister of Finance and President Lula, of course, are absolutely engaged in an agenda to move our economy towards a low-carbon economy and a more just economy. I always like to mention that having macroeconomic stability in a better business environment is very important. It's a prerequisite for development, but it's not enough. We can have macroeconomic indicators solved, we can have a better business environment solved, and we are doing it in Brazil. GDP is growing, unemployment is in the lowest level ever, poverty in the lowest level ever. We just approved a major tax reform that's going to completely change the business environment in Brazil. But all of this can just organize the playing field, but in the end, we could have a growth that is based on the destruction of the environment, that is unfair, that is based on exporting commodities without really adding value in that economy. That's why we have to work on having those pillars of macroeconomic stability and improving the business environment, but at the same time, create this new path for development that is based in technology, in innovation, in productivity, in reducing the environmental impact, and in bringing prosperity for everyone. That's what we are calling the Ecological Transformation Plan. It's this set of policies to create this new way, this new path for growth. And since then, Patricia just mentioned a few of the results that we got. I would like to highlight here the approval in Congress of the compliance carbon market in Brazil. It was approved in the end of last year in an ETS model with a cap and trade similar to the European Union one, the one in California. And we are right now working on the implementation of this compliance carbon market in Brazil. Beyond this, and working on this idea, since we have COP in the end of this year, Brazil is leading an effort to create a coalition of the willing between different countries in the world to create an integration of existing compliance carbon market. We are still in the beginning of this process, but it might be one of the results that we could have by COP in the end of the year, integrating existing carbon market with a shared budget for carbon emissions, and that takes into consideration different levels of per capita income between those countries. So this is a very important policy domestically and internationally. I would like also to highlight here the issuance of sustainable bonds by the federal government, by the Treasury, that allowed us to put that money, about $2 billion in each issuance. We had two so far, so $2 billion and $2 billion, $4 billion so far. That's going to the climate fund that is managed by BNDES, the major development bank in Brazil, that usually had a disbursement rate of around 200 million reais a year. And now we are moving from 200 million reais a year to 10 billion reais a year. So it's a 50-fold increase in the amount of competitive interest rates for projects associated with the Ecological Transformation Plan. Patricia also mentioned the new law that was approved that we call the Fuels of the Future law, that establishes not only more ambitious mandatory blending for ethanol in gasoline and biodiesel in diesel, but also opens new frontiers for biofuels, including green diesel, including sustainable aviation fuel, including biogas, and so on. And last, I would like to mention here the Eco-Invest program that is focused on reducing one of the major risks for investors who want to go to developing countries, which is the risk of the volatility of the currency. So the idea is to create a hedge program, a currency hedging, that allows for long-term investments in Brazil, as long as the investment is associated to the ecological transformation. So if you want to get this hedge program for, say, a coal-fired power plant, you are not eligible. But if you want to do this for an electric bus factory, then you'll be eligible for this program. We know this is one of the major hurdles for investors who want to come to developing countries, and the Eco-Invest program was designed to overcome this challenge. And Mario, who is leading this technical effort within the Treasury in Brazil, will present you more details about this program later on. So it's a very broad agenda. There are many more aspects we could talk about later on. More details you can get on the website as well, but the important point is it's happening. It's not only an idea as it was like 1 or 2 years ago, it's really happening.
Thank you, Rafael. André, Brazil is being recognized globally as one of the most advanced enabling environments for forest-based investments. Rafael mentioned a few of the tools that were created to make this happen. They are not only focused on forests, but they also helped to unlock other areas like energy transition, bioeconomy, and so. You've been really focused in nature-based solutions and forests mechanisms. So one of the mechanisms is really creating a lot of expectation, which is TFFF. We'd love to hear from you about that. And also, if you could elaborate a little bit on how you see the government working to make NbS really becoming a major line of investments in Brazil.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Patricia. Good morning, everyone. Great pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot to Tony, Viviane, and all those organizing this event. It's a great pleasure for the Ministry of Environment to be able to talk to the private sector directly. It's not something that happens so often. And this makes me to my first point, just stressing something that Dubeux made. This partnership, this close collaboration between Ministry of Environment, Finance, and others, I mean, industry and other ministries, is key. So what we are achieving in this government now has a lot to do with this possibility of really joint collaboration. So all these initiatives that have already been mentioned, they are joint products. Eco-Invest, the Brazilian platform, I'll talk a little bit about that, Brazilian Investment Platform, TFFF, which is co-led by the Ministry of Environment, Finance, and Foreign Affairs, and indigenous people, actually. So I want to stress this point that the goal of creating an enabling environment for investments in NBS is a joint effort, and it's coming from different angles, Minister of Agriculture as well, and so on. The same way that Dubeux started with some macro data, I think the same is in order for environment. Before talking about specific instruments, I think that we are doing what is the most important thing for this for this sector in Brazil, which is reducing deforestation and controlling land use. That's the main thing. I mean, sometimes we take this for granted, but I believe that what the Minister of Environment and our law enforcement agencies and so on, the most important thing that they can do to improve the enabling environment is to control deforestation, illegal deforestation, of course, right? So, and we have been very successful. Deforestation in the Amazon has been reduced by 50%. We have reduced deforestation in all other biomes, including the savannas, right, the cerrado, and so on. So that's number one. And to do that, and to keep deforestation down, I think that's where this conversation here, from our perspective, becomes so important. We need massive investment to change this paradigm of use of forests towards a bioeconomy. I mean, as you know, Brazil has been pushing for this idea, for this concept of bioeconomy nationally and even internationally. At the G20 last year, we managed to approve the 10 principles of bioeconomy. But it's a paradigm shift that requires significant funding, and then this conversation is key. And it needs a menu of financing. So I will talk a little bit about TFFF here, but it's important that Brazil is looking at the TFFF as one tool in a broader set of instruments to generate financing for forests. So carbon markets play a very important role, including voluntary carbon markets. As you know, states in the Amazon, for instance, they have been doing what we call jurisdictional programs, right? Programs to reduce deforestation at the state level and then get payments for those. We are supporting those. We just passed new regulations about REDD+ and how these programs should be run, including how consultations should happen, because that's a bit of a contentious issue. So we are trying to address the pain points to make this type of business happen. On the TFFF, which is probably one of the boldest ideas that have been put out there, led by the government of Brazil, with 11 other countries that have been supporting 6 other tropical nations and 6 potential investors, we call it. But in a nutshell, the TFFF is trying to create a stable, predictable stream of payments to forests, to forest countries. It would be a payment per hectare. And that money would be generated through a type of endowment fund. For us to get there, to these returns on the endowment fund, we have the small task of raising more or less, this is all like numbers that are under still in modeling, but $125 billion, more or less. So it's very significant funding. The model is such that the TFFF would seek to get investment from sovereign investors of 25 billion. These would be investments. These would be return investments, I mean, low interest, but the idea is that countries would get their money back. So it's not grant funding. We are not pursuing ODA. A little bit ODA because the difference, right, in the interest rates would be counted as ODA. But anyway, the point is sovereign investments that would basically reduce the risks for the issuance of bonds. And I think that's the key element here. This facility would seek to issue more or less $100 billion in bonds. So it would be, I mean, the expectations, this would be AAA, AA bonds that would then pay the investors back at the market rates. And in addition to that, it would raise revenues for forest conservation. So we believe it is a very attractive investment option. We have been talking to the financial sector. The feedback has been very positive so far. But of course, I mean, for that to happen, we need to have all this structure set up and the risk to this bond low. And that's where we are focusing our attention now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, André. I had a few slides here actually showing a little bit of what you presented, just because we wanted also the investors to live with this visually. On the investments opportunities, these $160 billion need is described here per area, and in which sectors we have most of the opportunities. You're going to see here today, with all these opportunities that were already announced and the mechanisms that were launched, we have a third of the needs covered, but we still have the other two-thirds opportunities here that we need to unlock together. And here we see that many of them are in energy, in nature-based solutions, in sustainable agriculture, but we also have a significant need now to adapt our discussions towards adaptation, infrastructure and adaptation as well. So I just wanted to highlight that, yes, there was immense progress from last year to this year, but we still have significant opportunities. On the examples that they raised here, on Eco-Invests, we will have this session talking about the bid that is current on the table, but I really wanted to congratulate the effort that we all did together, Mario, André, Rafael, because it is unique that we have the government with the Ministry of Finance and Environment working together and also working together with the development banks. But this one was the first bid where we had a successful land program with, of $1.25 billion with a leverage of 5.5. The sectors and banks that participated are described here. And I think we have a very important opportunity to discuss today that's going to be covered later on the restoration of degraded pasture lands, where this is going to happen only with the structuring of the whole value chain, so the participation of different stakeholders will be critical to make this happen. Last but not least is the explanation of TFFF, because André has this by heart, but I learned, traveling, listening to the people, that everybody get curious, but a little bit confused because it's a super complex structure. When I visited the Bretwood ecosystem in the US, and I heard a little bit of the story of how they created that, and I see you guys doing this here again. Yes, it's super, super inspiring, the most similar thing that I've seen before. So here are a few details on what they described. And finally, on the business investment platform, where there was a concrete announcement of $25 billion in investments, there is also today an article in Capital Reset about the Industry Transition Accelerator. That's a critical pillar of this one here. So it's a lot of information for you together, because we want to make sure that next year we're going to come here and the gap's going to be smaller and the opportunities will be out there and captured by everyone. Talking about that, Rafael, I have a question to you on the numbers, because when we travel, people know that Brazil did well in terms of GDP growth. Inside of Brazil, it's hard for people to believe. Like, I've had these discussions with people that I literally had to get the numbers, show that Brazil grew 3.8% last year. So could you share a little bit about the results, the economic results, but also what are the main achievements and what are the concrete challenges that we have in the economic landscape?
Awesome, Patricia. I would say, before getting into the numbers, that on top of the Bretton Woods, we'll now have the woods of Belém set in these new solutions. In relation to macroeconomic indicators, I think it's worth mentioning that when President Lula took office in January of 2023, market forecast for GDP growth in 2023 was 0.8%, and in the end we grew 3.2%. In 2024, in January, the market forecast was that Brazil is going to grow 1.5%, a little bit better than the previous year, but still 1.5%, and in the end, Brazil grew 3.4% last year. it's 2 great years of economic growth. This year, probably it's going to be a little bit lower because inflation is somewhat higher, interest rate is raising, but still it's going to be a growth of something around 2.5%, and we hope to get even more next year. And unemployment, as I mentioned, is in the lowest level ever in our history. Poverty in the lowest level ever in our history. Exports hit a record for our history. Even export of manufactured goods hit a record in our history. And of course, there are 2 points that usually raise some concerns. One is inflation, and the other one is the sustainability of the debt in the long term. About inflation, it's important to mention that even though it's a little bit higher than the target, and it's happening all over the world, it's not only in Brazil that is facing this issue, we're working with all the tools that we have to tackle inflation. And even in that scenario, considering market forecasts for the inflation this year and next year, we're going to have the lowest average inflation for a 4-year presidential term since the Plano Real, the real plan that managed to reduce inflation in Brazil in 1994. So it's the lowest average of inflation for a 4-year presidential term. So we are far from being out of control. It's on the contrary. In terms of sustainability of the debt, it's important to mention that Brazil approved the new fiscal framework in the beginning of President Lula's term, and we reached the targets for the first year, the second year. People were concerned that we were in each year that we were not going to get the target for the deficit or primary surplus. And we reached it in all the years. We are going to reach it this year again. And now people are saying that we may not reach it in 2027, 2028. So it's getting better because the concern is initially we wouldn't hit get to the target in that year. Now people are talking in 2-3 years ahead. And that's the point. We have 2-3 years to work on that and get better results. And we are doing all the efforts that are necessary. Right now, there is a very important political discussion so that we can deal with the structural reforms necessary to guarantee the long-term sustainability of our public debt, because it's core to our process. But it's important to mention that all 3 major rating agencies improved the credit rating of Brazil since the beginning of President Lula's term. The CDS, the risk of default, was reduced in this period as well. So we are clearly on track to get all those major results sustainable in the long term, economically sustainable, not only environmentally sustainable. And all this adds to what I already mentioned very briefly about microeconomic reforms that are being implemented to improve the business environment in Brazil. There was a major reform in the insurance sector. There are many important reforms for guarantees with a new legal framework for collaterals. And the most important of all is the tax reform that is bringing us from one of the worst tax systems in the world. Yes, we do have, it's not something that it's not something new. According to the World Bank report, Doing Business, we have a tax system that's clearly very complex, but we are moving from one of the worst tax systems in the world to one of the best, totally digitalized, automated, that entirely exempts exports, entirely exempts new investments, and that is the framework that we want to create, so that we can work with those pillars to create this long-term agenda of development that takes into consideration a low-carbon economy.
Thank you, Rafael. And another point, I know we've been talking about everything that was launched and now is ongoing, but I know also, André, that you've been doing a lot of work now trying to unify and integrate all the information and processes around nature-based solutions. One of the challenges that the investors usually face is where to go. Where should I go in the government to understand the details on concessions, on forests, and so on? Could you share a little bit about what you're envisioning to do now to make the NbS as not only as a priority, but an easier priority for us to get to, especially at the government level?
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. It's a complex sector, right? By all means, and at the end of the day, we are trying to make money, but we are trying to protect, conserve, restore nature here. And to the Minister of Environment, that's actually our goal, right? That's the end of it. So we need to get this right. At the Ministry of Environment, I think we are trying to advance a number of regulations to make this clearer and improve. So I would say the national bioeconomy regulations now, they are happening. There's a plan, there's a program, there's a lot happening, and it's really trying to improve this field. Carbon markets, again, is another aspect where we have the ETS, right, the domestic market, which is being regulated by the Minister of Finance, but we are also moving with the DNA, the Designated National Authority for Article 6, which is under the Minister of Environment. So that's being put together. And I particularly believe that there is a lot of room for the voluntary carbon markets, and Brazil basically interpreting and communicating our own understanding of integrity. I think that's an area where we can and should move for COP30 to unleash this funding, right, that exists, this willingness to invest in voluntary carbon markets. Now, where to go for information? I mean, to our ministry, I'd like to highlight a few areas, right, now in concrete terms, and I think that the whole afternoon is going to be about this. There's a lot of movement happening in the restoration agenda, right? We have launched the Plana VEG program. Brazil has a commitment, a goal of restoring 12 million hectares until 2030. And this is embedded in our NDC. We need that. I mean, a big part of that. We need that to achieve our 59-67% of emissions reduction. So it's a very important element. And many of these instruments, they are being put together to help us achieve that. What we are doing, we are, for instance, now working with partners in trying to identify areas, concrete areas, we are calling them territórios da restauração, restoration landscapes. So basically areas that have not only the needs of restoration, biophysical needs, because they are degraded areas, but there is also the value chain of restoration is ready. You have nurseries, you have technical assistance happening in those areas. We are trying to we are working with partners to identify and communicate this to make it easier for those that are trying to invest. I'd like to highlight another area that I think we don't talk a lot about, but sustainable forest management. So this is not restoration. It's managing the forest as it is. Brazil has a very robust system of forest concessions, right? This is managed by the Brazilian Forest Service. We have just announced the largest forest block ever awarded to the private sector. It was 450,000 hectares of forest in the south of Amazonas State, Apuí municipality, in 4 blocks, and all of them had massive subscription because there are questions, right, about this business. It's been very tough in the past. Many of you here have participated in this, but we are working very hard. It's a difficult sector, by all means. I mean, you have problems of law enforcement and all of that, but it's the business in the middle of the Amazon, generating jobs, income, and reducing deforestation. So I'd like to highlight that because we are still expecting that in the next 2 years, we would award at least 1 to 2 million hectares more of forest. So there's a big pipeline, so stay tuned. That's going to come online soon. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So many opportunities. Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, André. In the next panel, we will have our high-level champion talking about COP30. So to finish in a high tone here, would love to hear from you in one sentence. What's your dream for, a successful COP30 in your respective areas?
Well, I would say we have, it's just one sentence, right? I'll have to summarize even more. But we do want to have 2 major achievements. One is the Tropical Forest Forever facility, and the other one is the integration of carbon market by this coalition of the willing.
My dream is very clear. I see the picture. It's a picture under a Brazil nuts tree in Belém, surroundings with the leaders, the world leaders, announcing the launch of the TFFF.
Thank you so much. Thank you.